Oh, started. So welcome today to the HR Division's training webinar, teaching webinar. I'm David Kaplan. I'm at St. Louis University. It's early morning here for me. I hope everyone has either had a very good day or is looking forward to a great day ahead of them. I want to thank the HR Division for hosting this webinar. Today we have three presenters, Doreen, Billy, and Susanna. All three of them presented at the Innovative and Experiential Approaches to Teaching HR PDW in Chicago that is hosted by the HR Division. We're nearing our 10th year of doing this. This is and we'll be in Copenhagen. So if you will be attending the conference in August, we look forward to seeing you in person. This is also more colloquially known as the HR potluck, because there's a lot of different really great teaching experiential exercises to learn from. So I'm just going to go, the order of today is going to be Doreen, she's at the University of Kentucky, followed by Billy, who's at the University of Maine, and Susanna, who is at the University of Vaasa. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to turn us over to Doreen. They'll each present and then we will share some of the questions that people pre-submitted, and if we have time and the ability to open up to more general questions. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everyone. Well, I say good morning, but it's morning for me, but hello, everybody. Let me just really quickly figure out here the screen sharing. Take this one. Okay, does everybody see my presentation? Okay, perfect. Okay, so I guess title is whatever this seminar is, so I'll just skip right through that. And I want to start with my journey to innovation in the classroom. It was really, I had started teaching as a PhD student in 2019 in January, and the first semester went fine, but I wanted to engage students more, actively involve them in learning. And so I was trying to find ways to do this. And so two things happened right around the same time in the summer and early fall. I attended a workshop at Kent State University by Angelo Carnegie, who was talking about active learning and flipping the classroom. That was very inspiring. And at the same time, or shortly before that, I was actually at one of the HR potlucks that David had just mentioned. And I learned about this book and that you see here, Teaching Human Resource Management and Experiential Approach. And so those two things really, really got me into active learning and using a lot of exercises, discussions, and such in the classroom. And so one of the questions that we got in preparation for today was what makes an innovative teacher? And I was thinking about this, and I guess three things came to mind for me. The first thing you need is a vision. What do you want your students to really take away from the class? What is it that you want them to take into the world? And then you also have to really understand student needs. And I noticed this because I have switched universities a couple of times too. I was a PhD student at Kent State University, taught there. Then I was at LSU, taught there for 3 years full time. Now I'm at UK. And students are a little bit different from institution to institution, even though those are all three state universities in the US. But I think the gist of it is get feedback from students, hear what they need, and make adjustments where warranted, though. You can do this during the semester if you get feedback, say midway through, and definitely from semester to semester. I say make adjustments when warranted because you will get students who say, I hate the role plays, and you will have students, I love the role plays, let's do more of those. So it's a little bit of a, right, pick and choose what you think really makes sense depending on how many students say what to you. It's always very funny to see the individual responses in the feedback, for sure. And then the last thing, very important though, is openness and adaptability. So I try to keep up with the news as much as I can. What's happening in HR, what's happening in organizations in the business world more broadly, what's going on in research, any new findings, but also what's going on in tech. And I say tech because, you know, AI basically caught us all off guard in academia, and then suddenly we had to deal with that. And so try to stay up to date. And a lot of the times I get inspiration from what's going on around me, and I can bring it into the classroom. Also, attending workshops, webinars like this one, presentations, connecting with others, even in other fields who teach, is also really, really enriching. You get ideas from others. If your university has a teaching and learning center, I highly recommend connecting with people there. My institution now, for example, we have like a monthly meeting on Fridays, and we just exchange ideas and experiences. And a lot of innovation also can come from that when you hear what others do. When it comes to curriculum design, my foundation I got from my PhD program. We had a little workshop, a semester-long workshop for credit, where we learned how to become an instructor, so to say. And so the textbook that we used was from Wiggins and McTighe, Understanding by Design. And I really still use this so much because the gist of it was design your curriculum backwards. So start with what do you want the results to be, which takes me back to the vision that I said earlier. You need to figure out first, what do you want your students to get out of this class, this course, and that's where your results will come from. And from there, you work backwards, figure out how can you students show what they've learned and what you want them to take away from that. And then based on that, you will determine all of your instruction, all of your lectures, all of your experiences and such. Yeah. Expectations of students, I just basically popped in here what I put in my syllabus. I think the general expectations are probably the same for everybody, and I'm sure a lot of you use this already. They come to class prepared, attend and engage, accept that there will be challenging topics and embrace those challenges and work through them. I also always emphasize to students, and I do this throughout the semester and repeat it, ask me questions, reach out to me, come to me. I'm here to support you. A lot of students don't take me up on it, but the ones that do, I see their progress and their improvement throughout the semester too. But what I really want to emphasize is in-class expectations, because I think this is very important when you innovate in the classroom and when you do experiential exercises. And so I really encourage students to share their views and their experiences openly, and also be open to what others share. But I also ask them to communicate respectfully, because especially in HR, sometimes topics can get contentious, and there are some political leaning topics in there. And so I want them to be open. I want them to discuss, but I want them to do it respectfully. So I try to emphasize that from day one on. And then also minimizing, eliminating disruptions, distractions, I think is important also to warrant the respect that I want from everybody. When it comes to assessments and grading procedures, I basically, I put this little matrix here. I do low stakes and high stakes assignments, and I have assignments that are focused a little bit more on assessing knowledge. And then I have assignments that are getting more at this pure application. Can you take this out into the real world context? Can you translate it? So I give students smart book exercises. This from McGraw-Hill Connect, which is the textbook that I use. And I do this for extra credit, and those are all due before class starts on the topic. And that's how I incentivize students to come to class prepared. It's very, very small points, but a lot of students do this. Attendance is knowledge, right? The lecture part, if you will, is gaining knowledge, and that's low stakes. They get a few points for this. Engagement is more application. That's where the experiential exercises come in, and I have three examples here in a minute. And then homework, also low stakes. I give students three attempts, and they have quite some time to complete this. And it's typically a mix of knowing and applying. And this is also through McGraw-Hill Connect. For high stakes, I have exams, closed book, closed notes in the classroom on paper. So most of that is knowledge-based, but I do throw some application questions in there that kind of like then lean into the applying goal that I have for the students. And then finally, I have a big team project that's semester long. Currently, it's a case study on Amazon and their HR practices. And that's mostly applying, but obviously I have this like overlapping a little bit with the knowledge because they need to have the knowledge to be able to do this successfully. All right, let me show you just a couple of examples from what I do in class in terms of experiences, active learning. So, and this is also something that I presented at the HR potluck. It's my virtual HR scavenger hunt. This is something where I want the students to get exposed to the different HR roles and responsibilities in a very low stakes, quick kind of way at the very beginning of the semester. The way I have my curriculum designed is we start with HR in context, and we start with how HR fits into organizational competitiveness and strategy and such. And so the students need to know at least very, very rudimentarily what is recruitment, what is compensation and such. And so the scavenger hunt allows them to get that kind of knowledge already, and they get to connect their own life to it, or, you know, like easily accessible sources on the internet. So basically, this is due at the very beginning of the semester, I think within the first week. And I give students a discussion board. This is on, we have Canvas here. And so the students get to choose out of these roles and responsibilities of HR, and I give them a description or a definition of each. This is what it is. And then I give them a task. And the task is either something that they can look up online and that's kind of sort of fun and quick, or it's going to be something where they can talk about their experiences. So for example, for recruitment and selection, if you look here on the right side towards the bottom, I asked them to post a selfie or a photo of their job and tell everybody, how did you get this job? How did you find it? How did you get hired? You know, what was the process? So they get to start to make sense of what is recruitment and selection. A couple of tips for implementation. I make sure that I use the definitions from the textbook so that the students get started connecting to the readings. I provide my own example, so I complete each task myself, and that way the student have some guidance of what it might look like the way when they respond. And I use a platform where the students can see each other's posts, because sometimes it's nice they react to each other's posts because they find something in common or something along those lines. So it's also a way to sort of build community early in the semester. When it comes to challenges, because I do this so early in the semester, student late ads are difficult. So they oftentimes don't join early enough to basically do this alongside of their peers at the same time. I have to give them extensions and they will do it later. So it kind of takes them out a little bit of the community. There are some time constraints because it's so early in the semester and so quick after the first day that you have to really juggle like how many roles and responsibilities do I want them to complete the tasks for. And then the debriefing, I don't do a pointed debriefing of this in class right after the assignment is due, but rather I bring up what students have shared throughout the semester as we get into the chapters that focus on the particular roles and responsibilities. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Example 2, this is where AI comes into play, and this is something relatively new that I've started doing because I am lucky enough to get funding for a premium ChatGPT account. And I created my own GPTs, and I made role plays for students in 2 of my classes. I have a people analytics class and the general principles of HR class. And essentially the students get to play a role of either a people analytics project lead or a manager, and they have to go through this scenario of either a performance review or having a conversation with stakeholders in the organization about wanting to start an analytics project and finding some resistance. So the students get to experience these conversations in a low stakes environment. They don't have to be scared to talk to anybody because they're talking to a bot instead of to each other or anything like that. Every student gets to experience what it's like to be on the side of trying to convince somebody of a project or trying to convey sometimes not so good performance feedback, right? Those are situations where students might feel hesitant and nervous and such. And I think that the experience with the bots allows the students to go through these conversations and try them out without having to sit across from somebody who receives that information. And I've had really good feedback from the students. They really like this. So I use the GPT itself to help me create instructions for the custom GPT. So it told me what it needed to make the roles work. I tell students beforehand to bring their laptops because not everybody does bring their laptops to all classes. So I make sure that they are aware they will need a laptop for this so they can all do it. And they also need a ChatGPT account, but only the free one. I spend class time first reviewing concepts and best practices so that they know how to approach the conversations. Then I let them go through it. And I also instruct the GPT to give the students feedback. So they get learning out of this and know, what did I do well? What did I not do well? Where can I improve? And if we have enough class time, I even let them go through the experience twice. Then we spend some class time debriefing as well and just talk about the experiences, and everybody shares out in whole group setting. You do need funding for the ChatGPT though. If you're doing a custom GPT role play, you need to have the premium account. So the question with funding certainly comes up. There's also always this, what if, is it going to work the way it's supposed to? Is the GPT going to play the role the way I wanted it to? And I've actually also had students game the system and just ask the GPT, what do you want me to tell you? And so that's where the learning experience kind of goes away. It's really only happened once or twice, but yeah, some of them do that, I guess. The last example I have for you today is my benefits selection experience. And this is basically where students just envision being an employee, a new employee, and having presented to them all of these benefits that the organization offers to them. And if you've ever had this yourself and you were new to this, that's a feeling of being overwhelmed. What all is this? What does this mean? What do I have to select now? I only have 30 days. And so I try to basically translate HR practices into the employee experiences here and help the students get an experience for what are benefits, what all do they mean, what impact do they have on my paycheck and on my safety net and such. And we go through this benefit selection experience where the students pick and choose, this is what I want, and then they see the outcome. So it helps reinforce the benefits concepts from the chapter, but it also connects it to their real life and what is to come for them once they graduate and get their first full-time job. So what I do for this is I use information from the university, which is freely accessible to the public, on what the benefits programs are, since we are a state university. I use Excel formulas. They're the best. That way the sheet works really, really well for the students and they don't have to start calculating anything. It just would take away time from the actual purpose of the exercise. And I simplify where reasonable. I say this especially because of tax rates and marginal tax rates for income taxes. I just basically do like a very simplified formula for this. So taxes are higher than they're supposed to be, but it still works. In terms of challenges, there's a lot of concepts, insurance concepts, benefits concepts, some of them that are not in the textbook. And so you need to really take your time explaining these so that the students understand it enough. And that also brings me to time constraints and keeping that in mind. I spent a whole class on this, but the students really love it and feel a lot more prepared for the real world once they do this. Okay. That's all I have, but I'm happy to talk more about any of this once we get into the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doreen. That's really great. Three really wonderful exercises. And the scavenger hunt was the one that you presented, right, in Chicago, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, hopefully we'll see more opportunities to see what else you're designing, because that's all really great.
Thank
Now
you.
we're actually moving east, so we will have, actually it's all geographical order. So, Billy is next and, great, he's all queued up. All yours.
All right. Thank you, David. So, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and good night, as I believe, I think that's what Jim Carrey says, right? Right. So, since I'm going to start with talking about HRM activities in pop culture, or incorporating pop culture into HRM activities, thought that seemed appropriate given our time zone thing. So I'm Billy Obenauer, Associate Professor of Management over at the University of Maine. I've done a lot of work on pop culture in teaching, and I actually present on it at San Diego Comic-Con pretty routinely. And as I was preparing for today, one of the things I thought about was, we often talk to the pop culture audience about pop culture and education, but we rarely talk to the education audience about pop culture and education. So as I'm going through my activities, I wanted to talk about that. So, as I start, why do I incorporate pop culture into my course activities? Two real things that I think about are, one, gives me increased engagement, and two is retention of learning. I remember years ago I was talking about Rawls' Veil of Ignorance in my business ethics class, and I was grading. When I teach about Rawls' Veil of Ignorance, or I'm sorry, excuse me, I was not Rawls' Veil of Ignorance. I was talking about Kant's categorical imperium. And when I teach about that, I use Superman as a reference point, because Superman has categorical imperiums in that he will never kill under any circumstances. It doesn't matter. Darkseid could be ready to go destroy an entire planet. He would not kill Darkseid. He would let Darkseid kill a million people, but he wouldn't actually kill Darkseid. So I use this as an example, and I'm grading exams at the end of the semester, and I read this one short answer question, and the student writes, "I can't remember the name of the rule, but we also called it Superman's rule," and then writes a detailed description about Kant's categorical imperative, and it was Kant's categorical imperative, and it was just amazing to me to see how incorporating that pop culture reference helped my students really understand and remember concepts that they wouldn't have remembered if there wasn't anything they could connect it to. But one of the challenges that I've noticed as I do this is that if I don't normalize this in my course, then students won't trust that they can fully engage with it. So they have to understand that I am fully comfortable with them engaging with this material in this way, or they'll actually withdraw from engaging with the pop culture elements of my course. So one of the things that I do is I work really hard to normalize this. And I'm going to talk about that real quick before I get into a couple of activities. So in my title slides, I will often show different comics of Batman and how he's related to human resource management activities, because there's comics where we see Batman selecting a new Robin, which is employee selection, or their training, or when he fires Robin, and it's an example of employee separation. And these types of things help students realize how often we're talking about HR practices when they don't even realize that they're talking about human resource management practices. Within my syllabus, when I tell people how to address me in an email and say to spell my name correctly, there's a joke in there that says "incorrect but acceptable, dear Batman." And every semester I get 2 or 3 emails to Batman at some point during the semester. When I talk about benefits and I'm explaining unemployment, I'll open up class with a scene from Seinfeld where George makes up Vandelay Industries and makes Jerry pretend to be running Vandelay Industries so that he can trick the unemployment office into thinking that he's applying for jobs. And I use that as an example when I'm talking about the requirements for employees to receive unemployment benefits. And similarly, I recently introduced Walter White to my benefits unit, talking about how really his HMO not covering his cancer treatment was a huge part of why he started producing meth, right? And that the entire Southwest United States would have been shielded from blue sky if his employer had just had either a better HMO or a PPO, right? Right. So these are some of the examples of how I'll bring these things into classes. And even on my exams, I will incorporate pop culture into the wording of my question. And this does a few things. One, it lightens the mood for the students as they're taking the exam. But two, while ChatGPT can still solve these questions, they can't simply Google them, because if they Googled this question, they're going to get a bunch of pictures of Mr. Slate and the Flintstones and things like that, but they're not going to get a course hero response or a Quizlet response or anything like that. Again, ChatGPT could still can still solve it, but it is another element of protection. But as students are exposed to all these different things over the course of the semester, they become a little more familiar with, my comfort with this, and they're more willing to engage and take risks in activities that involve pop culture. So this project that I'm going to show you here, this first activity, it's a case study of the Green Lantern Corps. And I came up with this idea at San Diego Comic-Con a few years ago. I was sitting watching the premiere of this movie, Green Lantern, Beware My Power. It's midnight. I'm 40-something years old. I'm sitting with a bunch of other 40-something-year-old men in the middle of the night watching a cartoon. This is where my life is at this point. And as I'm sitting there, I'm watching the whole thing and I'm going, gosh, the Guardians of the Universe are really the worst HR managers ever. They claim to be the best selectors of talent, but they're absolutely awful. I mean, they selected Sinestro, right? And as I'm watching this, I'm like, disaster after disaster after disaster. And I texted a friend of mine who's an HR professor at Western Michigan University, and I said, hey, what do you think about this for a case study? And she goes, it's brilliant. I would do it. So I said, okay, I'm going to give it a shot. And I launched this project that basically requires students to watch an hour and a half long cartoon and analyze it from the perspective of an HR manager. Okay. And I make it an optional project. Okay. So they could choose this or they can choose a traditional case study. Because I don't want somebody who thinks this is silly to feel like they didn't get their money's worth out of their education. But it's a fascinating project where, like I said, they'll watch the movie, they'll analyze the Green Lantern Corps from an HR perspective, and then they'll deliver a presentation where they'll give guidance on rebuilding the Green Lantern Corps from an HR perspective. And what they get out of this versus a traditional case study is, in a traditional case study, I find that my students will always repeat what's been done in the past. So rather than come up with new innovative ideas, they'll look and see what other companies have done and suggest the same thing. Okay. So really they just end up repeating information. AI has done these traditional case studies 1,000 times. So AI has very good output that can guide them and kind of shield them from having to think about it. And there's also a pretty decent cost of accessing materials. Whereas with the pop culture case study that I use, there's not really a good template for rebuilding a team of intergalactic space cops after it gets wiped out by the parallax. So, the students have to look at this from a completely different angle and be creative in answering these questions. And they actually are forced to apply concepts in a different way than when they're just parroting information back, right? Also, AI will often pick the wrong storyline. So if I'm telling them to watch Green Lantern Beware My Power about Jon Stewart that came out in 2022, I'll get presentations on the Ryan Reynolds movie from 2010. And, it's a pretty good indicator right away that somebody didn't do the assignment that they were supposed to do, right? And the cost of this is frequently free. So whether they can stream it on their own service, or in my case, my library put it on reserve and made it available through our LMS, we're able to reduce some costs for students that way as well. So an example of what an objective looks like in this case is I asked students to identify an externship that they could put a Green Lantern Corps member into. So I talk about how there's a typical externship where we see Green Lantern Corps members placed within the Justice League with Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and so on. But I say, you see the problems that the Green Lantern Corps has. What other types of externships would you recommend? And some examples of responses that I've gotten from students that I think are brilliant are, I've had student teams suggest that they work with the NYPD so that they can learn how to respond to crime without having to use their superpowers, so that their superpowers will become more effective in the future because they won't rely on them continuously. One group, this is probably the most brilliant response I ever got, said that they should do an externship with Crypto the super dog because dogs can teach others about loyalty, and Green Lantern who have gone bad like Sinestro really need to learn those types of values. And they've talked about things like putting them with other superhero teams that have more fun in their work so that they can learn how to make their jobs not miserable. So these are some of the examples of what I'm talking about with how they apply the concepts as opposed to simply regurgitating. And there's also a ton of creativity that comes. Like the best artwork I ever get in my presentations is in this project because the students are engaging with something creative and it helps them think to be creative, which is just amazing to me. So, the key here not is to make you all do the Green Lantern case because not everybody's going to like to do the Green Lantern case, but to think about how do you design your own pop culture case if that's something that you're interested in. So for one, it's got to be something you're passionate about, right? When I first came up with this idea, I couldn't stop thinking about it for a week, right? Which was one of the things that told me this is a project that I should definitely run. Two, there's got to be easy access to students. So I, from day one, made sure I had copies of the movie available that I could have for my students. But when my library put it on reserve, that was definitely my go point because I knew there wouldn't be any economic barriers to students. I'd say identify 4 to 8 learning outcomes that you want to come from the case, and you want to be very specific about those because people are going to be highly critical of these types of assignments because they're unusual. So you want to be able to clearly demonstrate what your learning outcomes are if somebody questions them. Also, your solution should require some type of unique approach because if they don't require a unique approach, then you're not getting the gains from a fictitious case as opposed to a real case, right? Students should find it fun, and you have to recognize that there might be no correct answer. So if you look at what I was showing before with the externships, I don't know what the right externship is for a Green Lantern to go into, which is why I love that objective because I've gotten 100 different responses for it, and they're all correct in some way, shape, or form, which is really reflective of what reality can look like at times. The second activity, which I presented recently in Chicago, is it's my end of season game called HR Survivor. And this is something I run on the last day of my class every year because I noticed that on the last day of class, when the weather finally starts to get warm in Maine, we don't have students show up, right? Because they've all done the math to figure out if they need to be there. You know, they all are like, hey, we've been freezing for months. They don't show up. So I built this activity. It's based on the TV show Survivor. I have a plaque that hangs on the wall upstairs in my building where I get students' names engraved if they win every year. And it's kind of become a little bit of a calling card, right? So built this again based upon the game. It's got a variety of group tasks and then votes where people get voted out of the game. All tasks involve different academic components and other components. Okay, so the academic components are obviously they're like review questions and things that help make sure that the students are reinforcing their learning from throughout the semester. But I also have other components involved, such as throwing paper airplanes, answering random weird trivia questions about how many miles there are in Penobscot County, Maine, things of that nature. And the reason that I have these other components that aren't academic is because I want to make sure that all of my students can feel involved in the activity, whether or not they're the strongest academic students, and that everybody can demonstrate some type of value. So by having components that where someone who may be a C student can still excel, it helps to keep all of the students engaged in the game. So example of what a task would look like here. This is the second challenge in HR Survivor. I tell the students these paragraphs that you're looking at here, they come up one by one. So the students only see the top part, the top 3 lines first, where it says select 2 representatives, Representative A and B, for this challenge. And what always happens is the groups will select who they think are their 2 best students in the group, and then they learn that those students aren't allowed to answer any questions. Okay, okay. So we go on from that component, and then there's a series of questions that each team has to answer. One team answers, whichever team gets the most points in that round is the winner. But they move closer to the door. The team that gets fewer points moves further from the door. And what they find out is that their representatives are responsible for throwing paper airplanes through the doorway. Okay, so answering the questions right gets you closer to the doorway, but both teams have a shot to throw their paper airplanes through, which students in 2025 are terrible at making paper airplanes. It's something I've learned. It's a lost art, right? But it gets people active, it gets them involved, and once again, it creates a scenario where students don't feel like I have to be the best student in the class to participate in this activity in a meaningful way. Even right up to the end, the winning team, I'm named the teams Team Cat and Team Dog. If Team Dog wins, they have to bark. If Team Cat wins, they have to meow. And if they don't, the other team can steal from them. So even the losing team, even to the last second, pays attention, looking to see if the other team is going to fail in their final task. Okay. There's I mentioned that there's a twist, which is an additional resource round. This game, much like the TV show Survivor, has idols that can protect you from getting voted off the island. This game has what's called bias cards, and the students think the bias cards only protect you, like you're the boss's best friend, that type of thing. But there's an additional resource round where they can request more cards, and half of them get cards that get them automatically fired. And the twist lesson is don't allow bias to permeate your organization. because even if you think it's going to help you, at some point it's going to turn around and potentially hurt you, right? So even if from an ethical standpoint, you don't agree with me on this, from a self-interest standpoint, we should always try to maintain equity and merit within our organization. And that's kind of the twist that I have built into it, which is the big lesson that students leave that day with. Okay, and then I close up with a finale that has a Metallica song. We have a picture of Toby. I give something that's a reference to The Office, and it kind of brings together a lot of the ways that we use pop culture over the course of the semester to culminate the activity for the students. And again, the goal here is not to make you build your own HR survivor, but to think about how could you build a game or an event in your class using pop culture that reinforces learning in a way that is going to enhance what you do. And to start, I would say you have to pick a game that you enjoy. The rules have to be simple to manage. Okay, like the rules to this are very simple. One team wins, one team loses. Losing team has to vote some people off. Winning team is safe, right? And we keep going through the rounds. Okay, write out the instructions for your reference. It's really easy. I've done this activity a dozen times, and it's really easy to forget a step if you don't look at your instructions and then all of a sudden be like, oh gosh, I forgot this, right? I'm always looking at it to figure out ways to keep all students involved. One thing I noticed last semester was one student, after getting voted out of their organization, said, can I leave? I got other exams to study for, because they were like, okay, I'm done. So this semester, I'm going to have a play-in round where at the very end, all the students who have been booted from the game have the opportunity to play their way back in one last time, so that everybody has a reason to be engaged throughout the entire class, even if it looks like they're out of it. Okay. And then it's also got to be adaptable based on attendance. One year I had really terrible attendance and only 7 students showed up on the final day of class, which for a game that is designed to eliminate 20 students over a series of an hour can be problematic. So I had to quickly know how I was going to do play-ins and reduce the number of reductions and all that type of thing. So those are some points that I would give you for designing your own game if you're interested in doing that. And that's a quick overview of what I'm doing to incorporate pop culture into activities in my classroom. Thank you.
Thank you, Billy. That's great. Yeah, so as we see, there's a lot of different ways we can approach experiential exercises and a lot of different inspiration. And we've already both Doreen and Billy have already addressed AI. That's one of the questions that have been submitted. So we'll probably talk a little bit more because Doreen showed us how to use it. Billy talked about how to make your courses a little AI proof. But we'll come back to that topic, I think, also, and be open to discussion. As I said, we're moving east, so we'll move a little further east now with Susanna. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and looking forward to hear what you have to say.
Okay, thank you, David, and good late afternoon and greetings from Finland, the west coast of Finland in Vaasa. I'll just share my presentation. And hopefully you are able to see that now in presentation mode. So thank you for the invitation to attend this webinar. Excited to be here. And I'm representing actually the largest human resource management research group and group, especially in Finland. First, I approached this topic, innovations in the classroom from really general point of views, and like, why would I be interested or engaged something like this? And I thought that this is sort of like a 3-level type of thing. It's a matter of effectiveness. We have I don't know, that we might not be the only ones who struggle with growing class sizes, external pressure, funding, whatever. So in order to stay effective, innovative practices are one way to incorporate that. Then, of course, my own aspirations, what I want to try, what I want to achieve as a teacher, what I value as a teacher, and also my own teaching philosophy, what kind of teaching I want to provide, what kind of teaching is in me, so to speak. So all of these external but also internal values and pressures are sort of my starting points for innovativeness in the classroom. I also feel that as a prerequisite to be innovative, we need time for trial and error. It's not long ago that I crashed the whole Moodle of the University of Vaasa with my experiment. It didn't work out. I learned a lot from that, and IT was able to fix everything, but those kind of things happen. So I think that this is also a leadership issue, how we manage our curriculum, how we manage our portfolio, how we lead our teachers, what kind of autonomy we give for the teachers for trial and error, and what happens after that. So I really value that as well. I think one issue that we have always been discussing in these potluck sessions in AOM is where to find the time. It would be so nice to try different kinds of tricks and have the time just to absorb different kinds of ideas, but where to find the time. And I believe this is probably something that we're going to discuss later in the panel discussion as well. But peer support, peer learning, and these kind of webinars, I think, are the best ways to get sort of your ideas flowing. At least I got a lot of input for my own teaching from Doreen's and Billy's presentations, and I think that is the most important thing, that you start to sort of adapt whatever you learn, whatever you try, and how you can incorporate that in your own learning. But I also want to sort of raise the point that innovativeness is only valuable if it supports the learning goal. So innovativeness as such isn't something that we should, or at least I don't feel that I need to be innovative for innovativeness sake, but in order to support the learning goals. And it might be that that sometimes less is more, and old tricks work just fine or even better. So I think that is confronting news for all of us, that we do not need to be innovativeness just for the sake of it, but it has to have a purpose. And one way to start thinking about building different kinds of flavors in your teaching is to pilot something in a smaller scale, and do something small, and see where that goes. So here are a few of my examples. The other one I presented in AOM Chicago, and the other one in AOM Boston. The first example comes from my knowledge management course. I have also used the same kind of role play in performance management and leadership for global career courses. And whenever I introduce the role play to the students, I see their faces like going down, like, oh, not again, not now. Could we do something else? But actually this has worked quite nicely. I have also used this in MBA studies as well, even for executives, a bit of a modified version, but you are here able to see the background stories that I provide. So this is a really simple development discussion situation where I give the instructions for the supervisor and also for the subordinates. So this is a pair work that they do. I have done this in classroom. It works quite nicely, and even I think even better. I think we all can agree that quite many things work better in the classroom than in online or hybrid environment, because at least for me, the discussions are more fruitful after this in classroom setting than in online, but it works in online environment, in breakout rooms quite nicely as well. Another thing that we might be discussing later in the panel discussion, at least this is a struggle for us. But the setting is quite simple. The subordinate is being told that they are really fed up with their boss. They are afraid of the boss. They have like personal life issues, and things that they feel that they do for free for the employer, but they don't get recognized. They don't get appreciated. They don't get enough pay, and the sort of the usual story. And then for the supervisor, the background story is almost complete opposite. So this is in a way quite quite black and white case in a way. the supervisor is being told that they are fed up with the subordinate who don't succeed, who don't show as good performance and progress and effectiveness as the other ones, and they don't want to necessarily pay the subordinate as much as they would like to pay for somebody else. So really painting the picture of a situation that might be a difficult discussion, and the instruction for the students is that they are now entering the development discussion. I always give some time for them to prepare, especially in the classroom environment. I always make smaller groups of subordinates and smaller groups of supervisors where they can discuss prior to the development discussion, exchange ideas. I have some preparing questions for them that they can address and sort of think their strategy to enter the discussion. And also afterwards, I think it's really important to have some kind of debriefing after this kind of role play, because it's a role play, and I don't want that the students feel that if they enter this type of situation and this type of scenario, it might be that they don't agree with their peer. I don't want that there is any sort of anything between them after the discussion. So the debriefing is always needed. And in the classroom setting, I always make them go back to the original groups, subgroups, where they can discuss from the point of view of subordinate and supervisor, and exchange sort of their experiences and reflect on the discussion that they just had. And always by the end of the role play, I always show what was the description for the other party, because they don't see that before entering the discussion. So even though this is sort of completely made up setting and quite controversial in a way, black and white case, it still points out the sort of the issues that whenever having a development discussion, it's quite often we, or not even in development discussions, but discussions overall, we need to address people not achieving their goals, not showing good enough performance, and this is also touching the work-life balance and performance management, knowledge management even, and quite often the solutions that the students come up with afterwards are quite mature and something that I would probably see happen in real life. They emphasize training, they emphasize some kind of a target setting situation where they come up later and discuss the performance once again. They make a plan how they can address the work-life issues and that sort of thing. I have also seen people being laid off, so it can be sometimes quite a heated debate as well, and that's one reason why the debriefing is always needed. Another example from me is escape rooms. This is the one that I presented in the potluck in last time in AOM in Chicago, and we have been using this in our course Organizational Development and Change. We talked there a lot about change management, but also lean management and that sort of thing. And we started thinking that could we do something with escape rooms? Like Billy just mentioned, that your own personal sort of ideas and what you are interested or passionate about can be shown in the classroom. I'm not an escape room enthusiast, but I enjoy those activities whenever I get to something like that. It's not a hobby as such, but I actually attended a session myself where there were university teachers presenting their escape rooms and the escape room pedagogy in a way, and that got me interested how we could use that without having any sort of fixed setting for that. I know that there are institutions who have invested a lot of money in the technique where they can even examine the levels of carbon dioxide in the room and sort of think about how stressed the participants are, but our solutions are much more low scale and much more down to earth. But we have found a way how to do it with our students. The previous example, the development discussion role play, I have been using in master level courses. This is from more bachelor level courses, and students have found this exercise quite nicely. At first, when we piloted this one, it was completely extra assignment for the students. So we didn't demand that everybody is attending. They got some extra points for their course grade, but it was a pilot for us. It was a way for us to see whether this might work or not. Now, I think we have completed this 3 times now, and now it's a fixed part in the course, so something that the students need to attend. We have been observing their performance and the kind of the group structure that they have, and we have noticed that because in addition to this escape room, they also have group work, like a written group work, like a traditional group work that they do in this course. And we noticed that whenever this group was attending the escape room session together, their performance was better. And this year we even forced that the groups for the written assignments are based on whenever they choose to attend the escape room, so that because we wanted to see whether that has an effect on their performance in the escape room. So we are measuring, of course, the time is one limit. They have 60 minutes to get out of the room. We have some 7 to 8 riddles that they need to do. So we are giving points based on their performance, because we have been designing the riddles based on the course assignments. This is how our room last year looked like. So we started in the left-hand side in a conference, like a really basic conference room. And if you have been attending escape rooms before, once you enter the escape rooms, at first you might not see nothing. You might feel that there's nothing that you can actually do and how to get started. And that was quite the point. First time we weren't able to build the escape room in a sterile environment. Sterile by I mean that it was a classroom full with other figures and posters, and those were really distracting the students. And we noticed that we need to keep everything clean. The picture on the right hand side illustrates the factory type of setting, and once they entered this room, then that this was all that they were able to see. So they needed to do some 5S leaning models. They needed to do some competence checks. We had some figures in hanging on the wall, and those were the things that they needed to do. So if you have been to escape rooms, you probably know that there are locks that you need to find a code to. You might find a key that fits only one place somewhere, and the locks are the ones that we played quite a lot with. These are some of the examples from the tasks and riddles that we use. So different kinds of charts where you can sort of change letters to numbers or something like that are quite easy and quite convenient to get started. And as you can see, all of this material is something that didn't require a lot of money. I think the locks that we bought were the most expensive, $10-15 per lock. So that was all that was needed. Other than that, it's time. It's a lot of Googling. It's a lot of sort of figuring out how to sort of, in a way, quantify the material, whatever we have in the classroom. And it would be quite easy if we would only work with numbers. For example, if I would be teaching finance, it would be quite nice to use some mathematics as a way how to solve the riddles. And this year actually we did a crossword puzzle. That was one of the riddles based on the course material, and it was quite. I don't know if it was nice to see the students struggle, but because we did this escape rooms towards the end of the course. So they had all the lectures, they had already taken the exam, they had already prepared for their written assignment, the group assignment, so they should be quite into the topic already, but still they were struggling with the easy crossword puzzle. So once again, a really good indication for us teachers that what are the things that we need to take into consideration next year when we teach them different things, different concepts. What were the things that they remembered? What were the things that they had forgotten or never even thought about? So there are lots of things that you can, even though with this kind of recreational escape room thing that you can observe. And I think that goes to a lot of innovative, different innovative teaching practices that you can observe different things. You can learn a lot how the students process the information, what are the things that you need to do more or do less in the course. So there is a lot of feedback options as well. One thing that we have considered for the escape rooms is that if it would be a nice experiment if we gave the students a certain kind of role before they enter the escape room without others knowing what kind of role they have. For example, if somebody should be like really not making any decisions, somebody to be really bossy, and then it's not so much about how they solve the puzzles and the riddles, but it's more like how the group dynamics is working, and asking a reflection afterwards. How was the group dynamics? We do ask them to reflect on their group work and their group performance after that. So once again, I think that the debriefing in one way or another is needed, but it doesn't need to be about them learning the or demonstrating what they know from the course. It can be really easy tasks and then more focus on group dynamics and how the group actually works. A last thing that I wanted to point out or bring up was evaluations in related to innovativeness. I don't know if that even exists, but I wanted to share my example from this spring. It might not be new news to all of you, but something that I tried and I needed to do. Like in the beginning, I mentioned that staying or being effective is something that is actually needed, and pushing to find innovative ways. Also, how to get the students back on campus, because that is at least something that we struggle quite a lot with. We have a lot of adult learners who live and have their life somewhere else, but still we would like to see them on campus. So what I did in my knowledge management course was that regarding evaluations, I organized 5 workshops, each of them having a visiting lecture, some pre-reading, pre-material, so sort of like a flipped classroom approach. And then I accepted that if they all attend, or if somebody attends all the sessions, so 5 sessions, they get grade 1, which is the lowest grade, just by showing up for 20 to 25 hours. And I think that sort of marks the point that they have received the lowest level of the grades, and I accept that. I tried to push them to take the workshop instead of exam, because I offered less points from the exam than actually attending the lecture and the workshops. It didn't quite succeed. Out of 120 students, I think 20 to 25 chose the workshops, and the other one are just making the exams, which makes the course more boring for them and more work for me. But I think this is the way that the world is now. In addition to that, if they wanted to have a better grade, I had four different assignments for them to choose. So they needed to gather 50 points one way or another. There was a theory related case, podcast that they needed to do, interview, or a case assignment, and these were built in a way that I tried to prevent them from using AI. And by this, I mean that I always encourage them to try. I always encourage them to sort of exchange ideas and get ideas from AI, but I don't want to necessarily evaluate assignments that are solely made on AI. So if I ask them to do a podcast, it's quite obvious that they need to do that themselves one way or another, or interview, or these different kinds of measures. Measures that could prevent me from evaluating AI assignments. And for the last slide, I actually asked AI to get me a picture of this situation where academic staff discusses innovative teaching practices in HR in a webinar, and this was all I got. So this seemed quite boring. And I asked ChatGPT to make it more fun. More or less obvious. This was the result that I got. So of course they seem quite excited. So I think this marks the point, and that AI can, and especially generative AI, can be really good help, but it doesn't know all the answers, and it doesn't always come up with the solutions and innovative solutions that we might accept. And with this question, I end my presentation and look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Susanna. So we've, I think, seen three very different approaches to experiential exercises. I think all very interesting, all really good. One thing that you've each addressed was AI. That's something that I think is more and more of a concern for us as faculty, both like how can we take advantage of it? How can we make our courses and our exercises AI proof? Each of you talked about it in slightly different ways. If you could say a little bit more from a different perspective than what you used in your presentation, or any advice. One question that I saw that was put into chat, which is not exclusive to AI, but is an AI question, is just the idea of sort of resources. So each of you have things that where you've had to think about the resources of how much it costs to involve students, either from your setup. So Doreen, like I know you said that the students don't need the paid version, but you use the paid version. Susanna, it looks amazing what you did, but that obviously, like the escape room, looks like there's resource intensive. Billy, you addressed the idea partnering with the library to make the movie available for students. So again, the start off talking about AI, but if you could also address issues about resources, that would also be great. I guess we'll go in sort of the order. So I'll give Doreen the first bite at the apple, then we'll go to Billy and Susanna. So then everyone has a chance to talk. Thank you.
So in terms of AI, I've been using AI honestly quite a bit as of late, also because I am lucky to get funding for a premium account. Actually, we have a college-wide subscription that I'm on, and so I can use it a whole lot. In addition to the role plays, I've also created a TA GPT for my Principles of Human Resource Management course. And again, the students only need the basic free account to access this. But what it is essentially a resource for students to be able to study with. So I upload all my slides to it. I tell the GPT to not use the internet and not use this custom GPT for training. I give the students the link, and then they use it for exam preparation. And I tell them, ask the GPT to give you exam practice questions. Because it's not just about reviewing, what was written and what the slides were, but it's also about practicing. And so I encourage the students all the time, use this, ask GPT to make you questions, and the students seem to really love it. I have a lot of, you can see how many students have accessed it, and it's a lot. And so that's what I use on the front end mainly for now. In the past, I've also used assignments where the students had to critique AI output. So they would have to create prompts to basically complete an HR task, such as write me a recruitment plan for position XYZ. And then students would have to critique that. And that also helps them think critically about the limits of AI, which I think is nice and allows them to apply the best practices and the concepts from the textbook and from class. And then I use it a lot on the back end to help me create practice questions for the students that we go through in class, to help me fiddle with, announcements and such, to help me create ideas for new assignments, or just kind of change the way I word things in assignments to make it clearer to the students. I find it a very valuable resource, but it is important to note that students do take advantage of this, and Billy has certainly brought this up too. I don't want the students to submit something AI created to me if that was not the assignment. And so I have a very detailed AI policy in my syllabus that is, I think, 2 or 3 tiered. I tell them, don't use it for the low stakes assignments. You have multiple attempts. Test yourself and test your knowledge. But don't use AI for that. I tell them use AI for studying, and that's why I have the TA GPT, as I call it. And I tell them use it mindfully in larger assignments. Do not let AI become your brain, but use it for. So I give them kind of like some guidance how to use it and how not to use it for those larger assignments. I don't restrict it entirely, but I tell them to be mindful, and when they use it, they have to tell me, essentially. So that's the AI piece. When it comes to resources more broadly, I too am I don't want the students to pay for all kinds of things. We are a state university, and we have students coming from all over the state of Kentucky, and some from the more poor areas, economically speaking. And so we have, for the textbook, I use McGraw-Hill, the NOE textbook with Connect, and we have like a first day access, which is the cheapest way you can get this material. And outside of that, I try to really limit what our students have to pay for. And essentially, for me, they don't have to pay for anything else in principles of HR. So I use cases and materials that are provided from others that I print out for the students and distribute in class. They don't get to have they don't necessarily keep this or anything like that, but I do a lot with old school printout worksheets for case studies and worksheets. That's a lot of what I do to try to make sure the students don't have to pay for a lot of different things. So I provide materials to them. And Susanna said, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I follow that same principle. What's available to us, I share that, with the students. I don't make my own exercises for everything, but I try to make it such students can access it for free.
Great, thank you. Billy?
Yeah, so I think there's a little bit of overlap between what Doreen said and what I was thinking. So I had a checklist here, Doreen. I kept saying, great, I can't talk about that. Great, can't talk. But I think I can touch on some of the overlap, because I think that it's important to see how different people are using it too. So like Doreen mentioned using AI in her announcements. Well, like one of the primary critiques that I'll get is that students will say I'm like too dry in my language. They'll say it in other ways. Sometimes they'll be like, Billy's attitude, blah, 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 whatever. When really what it is I'm very straightforward on things. And some of my students take straightforward as not being gentle, I guess maybe. So when I made my announcement this week, I put it into ChatGPT and said, make this more peppy for me, right? And then made that my announcement for this week. And I then went and told my students that I did that, right? I told some of them that I did that because I wanted to get their feedback. And one of them said, I saw all those emojis and read that language, and I was like, who is this professor, right? So I think it's funny in a way, and I share that because it can help with that kind of thing, but it can also blur your identity. And I think that's one of the pieces that I'll probably wrestle with that, because if I do have, even if it's only 10% of my students who feel like I'm too dry in how I present things, maybe I do want to use AI to help with that, but I also have to do it in a way that I'm still me, right? So that's definitely a component that I would talk about there. I do something similar with having students respond to AI. I have a discussion board in my online class where the students get the prompt, and they're told, put this prompt into ChatGPT, or they're told, write your response to this prompt, then put it in ChatGPT, put ChatGPT's response in. Now I want you to compare them and tell me how you provide more value than ChatGPT. And if you don't provide more value than ChatGPT, I want you to tell me what your plan is to make sure that you can provide more value in the workplace so that you're not replaced by AI. Right. So that's like one of the ways that I'll incorporate it there. In terms of ways that we can kind of protect our courses, for one, I try to be honest with my students about what my problem with it is. And it's not that I'm anti-AI. I mean, there's a little bit of AI that scares me, but it's not that I'm anti-AI, so to speak. But I'll give them the example, and I'll start this beginning of the semester. I'll go, hey, what's 2 times 3? What's 7 times 6? What's 9 times 7? And get students to answer those questions. And I'm like, okay, you know those answers, which is why it's okay for you to use a calculator. Because if your calculator spits out some nonsense, you're going to be able to recognize that. Problem here is you don't know anything I'm going to teach you this semester for the most part. So if you start with AI, you're never going to know when it's nonsense that it's spitting out, which is why I need you to engage with the material. I think a lot of them understand that. And I actually had one student come up to me this semester and she said, hey, I talked to my mom about your AI philosophy and she agrees with you. So I'm on board with it. Right. And I'm like, okay, well, if mom's on board, that's good. Like we're good. Right. So I talked to them about that philosophy, but then I've also kind of incorporated it into my assignments. So I don't have a lot of written discussion boards in my online class anymore. I have the ChatGPT one. I'll do one where students are required to have references, and I do video discussions, because at least if they're doing a video, they have to engage in a way that's different from AI currently. Someday they'll be able to do it with AI, but right now they can't really. The other thing that I've started this semester, and I have gotten some backlash on this, I think it's been good. And then I'll just tell you, if you're going to do it, you're going to have some people who are upset, is on one of my case studies, I made 50% of their grade, whether or not all the information they included about the case was factually accurate. Because what I found was I was getting a lot of like AI hallucination type case studies. So now if you say something happened in the case that didn't happen, you lose 50% of the points. And I had 9 students who lost that this semester out of 95. And they were upset. But the response I gave them is I said, you're justifying firing somebody in your email. If you're putting bad information into that, you've now put yourself in line to be fired. So learn that lesson in this class where you can recover from it as opposed to in your career. So I'm starting to kind of incorporate things of that nature in. And it's not because I want to be anti-AI, but I'm trying to look at where is the challenge with it. And the challenge is if students aren't doing the learning and they're getting bad information, that's a real challenge. So I'm trying to account for that. In terms of controlling costs, like David mentioned, so I also use the NOE textbook. I think a lot of us do, right? And I don't use Connecto. One of the things that I did, and this was really labor intensive to do this to start, but once you do it, it works fine, is I exported all the questions that McGraw-Hill has for the NOE textbook, and then I imported them into my LMS so that I could build my own assignments. And the first semester that I did that, like I probably spent between 50 and 100 hours building this, like no exaggeration. But now it's in my system and I can do everything with it, and I don't have to worry about Connect, and I'm not kind of at the mercy of paying for Connect, which works out pretty well. In terms of other things, like I try to take advantage of subscriptions that my school has, which, it sounds easy, but it's not always. So like I used to use Top Hat in my class, and then we bought a subscription to iClicker, so I transitioned everything to iClicker because my students don't have to pay for that, right? Just like kind of basic stuff like that. And then the other component is I try to look at what the total cost to my students is in the class. And I try to be realistic about that if there's going to be any incurred expenses. And what I mean by that is it's really easy to go in with the ideal of saying, I want everything to be free. But the reality is that very little in life is actually free. And at some point, we might have to debate if it costs somebody $20 to do this, but the value is going to be greater than $20 long term from the learning. It makes sense to incorporate that if we keep the total cost of the course within the realm of what it should be. So I try not to add too much stuff like that. I try to make things accessible for free, but I'm also constantly looking at what the reality is as far as that overall cost component goes.
Great, thank you, Billy. Susanna?
Yeah, thank you. I think just a few things to add. Um, we are quite strict with our AI policy and what system we can use and what we can expect from the students. So I am using my personal ChatGPT description to sort of help me with my own work, more or less. I have created small cases for group discussions during the lectures because I don't feel that I am good in coming up with case examples or different kinds of situations, but I'm really good at rewriting them. I'm really good at like sort of observing what the students can discuss and linking those things to the course material and what I want the students to discuss. So getting this type of help, coming up with questions for group works, coming up with small cases for group works during the lectures. I think that is the quite low scale, but still very effective way to help me with my own work. So that is one way that I have used that, but we don't have university level descriptions. We don't have a lot of systems that we can use. We're basically playing only with our Moodle side. So whatever plugins we do have there are the only ones that we can use. So our solutions are regarding AI are more like the ways how we can effectively manage our own work and what that can give me. Sometimes it means translations whenever we need to translate something from Finnish to English, for example. Instructions for our international classes or something like that. Of course, that is one simple way how to use that, but that is that's basically it. We have been discussing that we should have like a university level GPT or something like that where we can safely put our information, because we notice, especially for the students who are doing their bachelor or master thesis, they are quite careless when it comes to using AI. They would like to download and upload their whole thesis into whatever free version they are able to use. So I think we are at the moment discussing a lot about ethics, and this is something that that I have also used in my own classes, where group works have included +1 group member, which is AI, and the kind of examples that Billy and Doreen already mentioned, that how to evaluate the information that they get from generative AI, and what to avoid. For thesis work, quite often I give them concrete examples how you can actually use that. So what is the kind of safe use? What are the things that you can actually use AI to come up with ideas, have somebody to discuss with you, because I think that it really doesn't matter whether it's me, whether it's their mom, whether it's their friend who they discuss their thesis topic with, whether it be AI, wherever they can get help to get started, and whoever supports them, I'm fine to go with that one. And actually, one of the cutest examples how to use AI was one of my students said that she had a really difficult exam ahead of us. So she asked ChatGPT to give her like appreciation and some kind of cheerful comments for the exam. And even though she knew that those were fake, she said that she felt quite good after getting all the compliments and cheer from the AI. So I think that was the cutest example. That is my last straw that I'm willing to try whenever I face a challenging situation.
Great. So I've been enjoying this. I hope, and there's been a lot of great information. We're not quite at 8:30. We started a little late, so I'm going to toss out one more question, but I do, for people who had hard stops at 8:30, want to let you know that it's okay if you clock off, and the video will be available to you. But I just wanted to offer sort of one more question. So one of the things that we haven't really talked about is actually is how to adapt, or what was the target audience. So one of the things a lot of people have questions about is larger classes or undergrad versus graduate, those kind of things. The one thing that I would just say is I appreciate a lot of you talking about is you have to be both sort of true to yourself, but also be prepared that things aren't going to work the way that you wanted, or a little student resistance. So I think that's something we all need to be prepared for. But, if you could talk about that. One specific question was, particularly for people with less experience or less comfort with it, is like, how do you get over that sort of like initial hook, or get people started to get them into the experiential exercise, that first couple of minutes of the class, to really get them from being a skeptic to someone who is really excited or embracing the activity. So again, we'll do Doreen, Billy, and Susanna, and then after this, I will thank everyone for being here. If you have additional questions, let us know, and I'll do my best to pass it on to the panelists.
All right, let's see. So when it comes to, I had a couple of ideas in terms of like getting the class started. I think it's very important at the beginning of the semester to set the tone. So, and a lot of that is getting students comfortable with one another. I mean, for me personally, a lot of the students know each other, but then there's still a lot of students that don't. So it's kind of like a mix of never seen this person before and have like my best friend. And so I do an icebreaker at the beginning of the semester where the students have to talk to each other and they have to find commonalities. It's called This, That, or the Other. I probably got it from some internet site at one point that has like a million icebreakers. But I basically ask the students some fun questions where they get to gather with one another, like, where are you from? What's your major? Do you like Netflix more than Hulu? Something along those lines. Something a little bit more personable. We talk about the best carb, if it's pasta or rice or potato. So they get to mingle with one another, they get to chat. And I think that helps them feel more comfortable in the classroom with one another. So that's not just me confronting them with materials. And so then throughout the semester, I also try to incorporate like small little things. Like yesterday, we talked about benefits in class. We started this off and I gave the students a little survey and that asked about their values and their life plans so that they could see, based on what I have planned for myself in my personal life and such, what kind of benefits would I want from my employer? What kind of support do I want? And then I show them the results, and then they again see commonalities and what others may have answered, even though it's anonymous. And it helps them make this personal connection. And I think it warms them up to, okay, we'll talk about this now. So I think that's a big thing that's worked for me, at least.
Thank you. Great. Billy?
Yeah, so Doreen, couldn't agree with you more about setting the tone from the beginning of the semester. Like I think that's key, because I think if you try to start activities and it's like something completely new to your students, then it's not going to work. I remember a few years ago, I had a paper under review at NTR, and they were like, well, how do you get your students organized into groups for this activity as quickly as you're claiming you do in your timeline? I'm like, well, they've been in groups every day for the entire semester, right? So, by the time I get to week 14, if they don't know how to get into a group of 5 within about 30 seconds, then I've completely failed them, right? So that was kind of an interesting perspective there. But I think that's like, for me, that's one of the keys, right? Is that I always start with a lot of small group discussions. Like almost all my classes have 2 to 3 small group discussions where they have 90 to 120 seconds to debrief on a topic. And I started that because what it does is it gets everybody talking. Whereas in a class of 50, if I ask a question and 3 people raise their hands, it's going to be the same 3 people every time. But if I put them into small groups of 5, they all talk, they all think through the problem, right? So that's how I started it, but I noticed that it also helps support these experiential learning activities, because then when we get into something bigger, they're all really involved in it. So I think that's critical. The other piece that I work on, which is interesting and tough sometimes, is really reducing the power distance in my class and trying to make students feel comfortable with me as a human, as opposed to being, you know, in that almost fearful state, which is really interesting because I have a reputation for being a harsh grader or one of the more difficult professors. So now, like, here I have that reputation, and I'm also working on how do I make sure I reduce the power distance so my students are comfortable with me. And the fact that, you know, I'll do things like bring my dog to class, bring my bird to class, talk about football at the beginning of class, things of that nature, just to help my students connect with me as a human. And then as I try to get into, all right, time to transition into this activity, it's easier to get them to make those moves, right? So I think a lot of it just has to do with the culture that we build in our classrooms and how we do that type of stuff.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, well, my class sizes are quite big, so teaching a class of 200 to 300 students doesn't sort of allow to do a lot of things, such as in smaller groups. But just like Doreen mentioned, like really quick polls, really quick, whether it's a Padlet, Mentimeter, Kahoot, some technological solution, or then just asking them to stand up. Asking them stand up who like the food today, stand up who likes summer more than winter, whatever the questions. It can be a bit more personal. When I taught the first course in management, the first course for freshmen in the whole of the university, I asked them to stand up based on where they were from. So just like, I think that the first 1, 2, or even 5 minutes are quite critical. When in the master level classes, I think that using methods like think, pair, share, or quick pair discussions is quite efficient. I really try to get them talking during the first minutes, because I have noticed that makes a lot of difference for them. It sets the tone that it's not only me who is doing the talking, or it's not only the teacher who is doing the talking, because I rely on group discussions, pair discussions during the lectures, which can take up to 4 hours. So I cannot talk for 4 hours, and nobody's willing to listen to me for 4 hours. So and whether it is something technological solution that you're willing to try, I use quite a lot of Padlet for debriefing the think, pair, share discussions or pair discussions, especially for the more junior students. The Padlet always gets some annoying writings if I show them or present them the whole Padlet for whole of the class. I always see some swear words or something really immature. I don't know if you have noticed the same, but that is something that for a while as a more junior teacher prevented me from doing anything like that, because I didn't want to see the students acting so immature. But now it works a bit better. For smaller classes, I have asked them to form a line based on your second name, just to get the kind of informal interaction between them, because it's also a cultural thing. Finns are quite shy and quite introverted, so it gets a lot of activities to get them talking and just start the more informal discussions between the students. But I think that AI is really good for this type of coming up with these type of ideas. And I use AI a lot for coming up with different kinds of techniques, something that I'm then able to adopt. And I try to follow my first 2-minute rule. So for the first 2 minutes of each of the sessions, I am not active, but the students are. So so by the end of the course, I hope that really has an effect on the students, because we don't have lectures or courses that take weeks. We might I might see them in the classroom a few times throughout the course, so or even in online environment a few times. So I cannot rely on continuously meeting them or having the kind of interaction. So it's only a few hours that I have the possibility to make a difference and sort of create the like the talkative and open environment in the classroom.
Great. Well, I
David, do
want
you
to
mind
just,
if I add something real quick?
oh, sure. Yeah.
I just realized, I think part of the things that you also mentioned that people were wondering about is how do you get started as the instructor in, providing experiential exercises. And I think, and I know how this felt for me because I was nervous too, but if you use things that are already existing, right? Again, not having to reinvent the wheel. If you use like, cases or exercises that are out there that have been published, including in the book that I've been using very heavily too, they have instructions and it makes it easier to find your path in. And once you feel comfortable with facilitating exercises that somebody else has already successfully done and has worked out for you, I think that provides a nice pathway into creating your own exercises for class that work for you and that cater to what you want the students to get out of the class. So that would be my suggestion. Just, don't start like fully with something new and see what happens. That's very scary. It can work, but it's scary. Use what's available, follow the instructions as best as possible, know that it's okay to not be 100% perfect, and just try it out. It's my suggestion.
Yeah,
Thank you, Doreen.
building on that, when I do something innovative where I'm not necessarily taking something that's already out there, I have kind of a rule that it's like one thing per semester, right? So that like, okay, if this is a disaster, my whole class isn't a disaster, it's the one thing. And I can pivot from it, I can recover from it, I can tell people it's experimental, that we're trying something new, and maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. But that way, you have that validated stuff that you have, and if you do want to tweak things and be innovative, you mitigate your risk a little bit. So love it, Doreen.
Yeah, thank you, Doreen, Billy, and Susanna. Yeah, I think that's a great point that, we talked about and Doreen talked about, making sure you have low stake assignments for your students for a grading and evaluation. Same thing if you're really new to the experiential game, start with small, and then you can adapt, you can iterate, and then you can just go bigger as you feel more comfortable. But yeah, so I want to thank everyone. There were our panelists were all wonderful. Susanna, Doreen, Billy, you were great. Matt, Hall, I appreciate your support and the rest of the HR uh, teaching division for doing the logistics and helping set up. I think we talked about this, envisioning this not as a one-off, but the first in several, maybe not several a year, but that as an ongoing series of webinars that we will do. So keep an eye out for that. Those of you who will be in Copenhagen, hope to see you there. As the HR innovation teaching potluck is a pretty regular part of the program. So thank you again for coming, and look forward to seeing and sharing with you again in the future. Bye, and have a great day.
See you guys. Thank you so much for presenting.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Have a nice weekend.
Yes,
You
you
too.
too.